Hey guys, so so glad that you're here to watch this training. I'm super excited to share with you the content of this talk today. Hey guys, it's so nice to see you. I'm so glad you're here. There's really Hey guys, I'm really excited that you decided to join me for this conversation, for this training, masterclass, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to be talking about emotional reorientation. I kind of came up with that because I had this experience a few weeks back of, and I'll get into this more deeply later, tell you the full story, but there was an experience that I had where I spent basically an entire day judging myself, judging my wife, judging others, judging myself. Essentially what it came down to. And then I went through a process of reorientation, reorienting my emotional state from a low point on the ladder of consciousness to a higher point on the ladder of consciousness, right? And in that process, I realized that there was something that I learned in depth from that I wanted to share and start sharing with people and more people and more people. And that's the intention behind this training today, which is to say, to help you learn how to reorient your emotional state. Go from a low point on the ladder of consciousness to a higher point on the ladder of consciousness. And now I've taken some notes. I have some ideas of what I want to share. And before I get started, what I'd really like to do is kind of bring you into this space. The best way I know how to do that is with the use of breath work. So we're going to go through a short exercise, breathing exercise. It's called box breathing, or sometimes I call it four square breathing, where you inhale for a count of 4, you hold your breath for a count of 4, you exhale for a count of 4, and hold your breath for a count of 4. And do that like 5 times. And I encourage you to really think about what brought you here today to this training, why you're here, and what you want to learn from this. And then let your thoughts go. And just really focus on your breath. Your in-breath, your out-breath. Focus on what it feels like in your body. Focus on what it feels like to hold your breath, either at the inhale, top of your inhale, or the bottom of your exhale. When you're finished with your 5 rounds of breathing, I'm going to do it with you. When you're finished with your 5 rounds, just open your eyes. Okay, I don't think I mentioned close your eyes in the beginning. And when you're finished, just open your eyes, and I'll know that you're done. And then I'll proceed. Okay, so now that you've kind of come into the space and we're here together today, the first thing that I'd like to share with you is the idea that all of our thoughts create all of our experience. And one thing I get when I say that to someone is a bunch of questions, right? One is, all of our experience? What do you mean by experience? How is it that thought creates that experience? So what I thought I'd do is just share with you answers to those 3 questions. And I'll start with experience. What is experience? Right? What is our experience as a human being? And for me, what it comes down to is what we feel in our body. That's how we experience life. Right? Because the thought that we have, whatever that is, creates some reaction in our body. Whether that's having angry thoughts, judgmental thoughts, often will cause a feeling of tightness in your chest, or sometimes even in your throat. That's what most people report anyway. Or, feelings of joy or excitement. Sometimes that can happen in your entire body, the whole thing, toes to the top of your head. Sometimes it's just in your belly. Anxiety usually shows up in the belly as well. So I encourage you to think about, what experience do you have when you have a thought about something? What does that feel like in your body? Now, that's the first part. Second part, all of your experience. Our thoughts create all of our experience, right? So what I believe is that, and let's say aside from like an emotional response to, or response to a stimulus like hearing a loud noise, or having somebody running at you, or some sort of surprise, right? The body kind of takes over, your brain takes over, the brain stem, let's say, takes over, and then you just get into this fight or flight response. That can actually get activated in other ways as well. But aside from that, our thinking creates all of our experience, right? So everything that we feel in our body has originated from a thought that we had. And then the idea that our thought creates this feeling is that when we have a thought, like we wouldn't have a feeling if we didn't have a thought, essentially. Aside from, like I mentioned, like when something occurs that we certainly don't have control over. And some people might say, well, some of my thoughts are unconscious. And well, that may be true. You're still having an experience in your body born from that thought, right? So the first idea for me was our thoughts create all of our experience. Another thought about our experience, and specifically the feelings that we have. The feelings that we have indicate the quality of our thinking, right? So if we're experiencing feelings of disgust, right? Something in your body, remember the feeling is something in your body, right? Well, let's go back to one that I mentioned before, anxiety. A lot of people struggle with anxiety, right? A lot of people struggle with anger. When that shows up in your body, there's something going on up here. Your thoughts are sharing with you, the feelings that you have are sharing with you the quality of your thinking, right? So most of us want to feel well, right? We want to feel happy and joyful, enthusiastic about life. That's what we are all seeking in any moment, in every moment. And our thinking gets in the way. But our feeling in the moment can help us identify that we're having thoughts that we may not want to have, right? If we're feeling tightness in the chest or butterflies in the belly, not that they're all bad either, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad to have these feelings. As a human, it's important to feel all of our feelings. But the feeling will show us where our thinking is. So if you feel it and you don't want to be feeling it, let your thought go and come back to well-being. And that leads me into the next idea I want to share, a concept that I want to share. And that is that we are, as human beings, born with a natural state of well-being. I'm going to repeat that. We are born with a natural state of well-being. Right? So if you imagine a child, 2, 3 years old, 4 years old, they're not up here, right? They're not thinking about the things that we as adults think about. They're not worried. They're not concerned. They're not feeling those anxious feelings in their body because they're in the present moment. And that's the trick, right? Be present so that we can really tune in to well-being. So kind of going back to the quality of our thinking, if we let go of our thoughts, we'll invariably come back to that natural state of well-being. It's just the natural state for us as human beings. Once we arrive in this state of well-being, wisdom will bubble up. And wisdom, for me, really looks like, well, in part, intuition. People will call it intuition. Right? The natural wisdom that comes to us when we're feeling good. That's what we're all looking for, right? Is to feel good and follow our intuition. The knowing that we have inside us that directs our lives, the decisions that we make. So kind of to recap, first, our thoughts create all of our experience. Then, any feelings that we have indicate to us the quality of our thinking. And when we let our thinking go, whether that's high quality, let's call it high quality or lower quality thinking that's producing something that we want to feel or something that we don't necessarily want to feel or experience, we move into our natural state of well-being. Wisdom can bubble up and direct us in our life. The next piece I want to share, I'm calling currently the creation cycle. And this is what it looks like. You have a circumstance that happens, right? Based on that circumstance, you have a thought about what you think it should be, how it should look, how you should be, what you should be doing. That thought leads to a feeling. Same thing we've been talking about, right? A thought leads to a feeling in your body that indicates what that thought, kind of the nature of that thought. Once you have that feeling, you move into action. Sometimes it's inaction. Sometimes we'll have a thought that drives some sort of fearful feeling in our body. Action doesn't happen. Other times we'll have a thought, excitement, enthusiasm about something. The feeling that we have is, that you've experienced it, I'm sure, right? That overall feeling of well-being. Let's just call it that, right? Your body feels energized. You feel energized. And then you move into action. And you take an action based on that feeling. And then you have a result. And that result is going to be something that you desire or something that you don't desire. And that's born out of that cycle, right? So you have a thought. If it's a thought that drives some sort of, let's call them a negative feeling, which leads to an action that you take, and a result that you get from that action. Right, so another example of that could be, for any of you that have parents, it could be, right, you're in a situation where you're starting to feel frustrated. So you wonder, what am I thinking about that's causing this level of frustration, right? So you can, of course, in the moment, you're probably not going to do this, right? But you have a thought. The thought probably is something along the lines of, I don't want to be here. I don't want this to be happening. My son or daughter shouldn't be acting the way that they're acting. I'm feeling frustrated. What action do you take from that, right? Well, likely it's going to be some sort of action that you don't want to be taking, like yelling at your kid or expressing your frustration with, an aggressive language or heightened level of energy or a tone of voice that will cause the child to feel sadness, anger, frustration themselves, right? And then what's the result out of that action? The result is going to be a separation, a disconnection between you and your child, right? Versus, let's take kind of the same example, but there's a circumstance, your child's doing something, and your thought is, oh, wow, right? They're obviously really struggling right now. How can I help them? Right? What feeling do you get in your body? You get a feeling of warmth. You get a feeling of love. Maybe not excitement, but potentially, possibly excitement, right? Because you're going to be able to help your child. Right? And then what action do you take born out of that feeling of love? Well, you might sit down. You might give your child a hug. You might say, oh, I see that you're struggling here. How can I help? If the child's really young, they probably don't even need words. You can rub their back or give them a hug. Or just squat down. Look them in the eye. Say, I'm here for you. Could be that simple. And what's the result from that? Connection. Love. Right? You and your child are now connected. And this is how it works with everything that we do. I think it's funny sometimes we speak about children in this way, right? But adults aren't any different. We all want the same stuff. We all want love, acceptance, encouragement, acknowledgement. We all want the same things. So just to reiterate, the creation cycle. You have a circumstance that occurs. You have a thought about that circumstance that drives a feeling. But then, generates a feeling is probably more appropriate, and then drives an action that you take in real time, right? Or an action, could be an action, and you get a result. And that can be perpetual too, right? As an example, let's go back to the child who's struggling, and your thought is driving a feeling of frustration, whatever that thought is for you, and you take this action that creates disconnection, discord between you and your child. That result is potentially your child acts up more, struggles more, right? And so that's the new circumstance. More struggle. What's your thought about that? What feeling do you have? What action do you take? What result do you get? That's why I call it a cycle. Over and over, over and over. It can happen on, with positive thoughts and feelings. So that's the creation cycle. So now I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. I want to share a personal story that kind of led me to, and I alluded to this in the beginning or spoke about it briefly. And I want to speak about it in a little bit more depth because for me, it really brought me back to an understanding of really just how powerful and impactful our thinking is on our experience of life, our lives. So as I mentioned, there was a weekend day, Sunday, several weeks back. I think the initial I don't really want to use the word trigger, but the initial circumstance that drove my thinking into this cycle of creation was, well, I'll just tell you. So I've had an electrical problem in my house I've been trying to track down. It's frustrating. I've been tracking it for a while, and I can't figure out what's going on. I've had electricians come in. They don't know. It's an old house that we live in, and the wires kind of are in disarray. Some of them are really old. I don't know where they go, and I've been trying to track them down. It's been challenging. And my wife says to me this one morning, I had intentions to continue this process of identifying what the issue is with a short in one of my circuits in my house, right? And I didn't tell her about it, that I had this intention to make this happen. And she asked me, will you take out the recycling and wash the toilets? And honestly, I can't tell you exactly what the thought was, but the feeling was, and very quickly was, ire, right? Anger, frustration, a little bit of disappointment maybe mixed in there, but the action that I took did not result in a positive experience, right? Where I said, yeah, sure, I can do that if you want to take care of the electrical problem. Real snarky like, right? So from that moment, basically for that entire day, and even subsequent days, right? That day was the highest intensity and most impactful on my negative state, my negative mood. And even tried throughout the day to like be more, continue to be involved with the family and not really be totally succumbing to the feelings that I was having, the experience that I was in, right? So basically for the entire day, I was being judgmental about myself and about my wife. And it was painful, truly painful. And I didn't see my way out of it, not for a while. Now then the second day, let's say Monday, I went to my work. I went to work, and that was helpful, right? Just kind of break free, get out of the environment, break free from that, and recreate the space. So my level of energy that I was involving in that thinking that was driving those negative feelings and the result of being deeply dismayed started to wane. And what I thought about afterward was I started to let my thinking go. I was involving myself in other things. And as I mentioned earlier, when we let our thinking go, we start to come back to well-being, our natural state. And from that state, we can start to see differently. Wisdom starts to bubble up. Now, I also believe that we have agency over what we think, meaning that we can sometimes, not all the time, sometimes choose what thoughts we want to have to drive a feeling that can help us create an action and a result that we want. Call that intentional thought creation. That's a different topic. I may talk about it in a little bit. Well, really, the crux of it is, I had this time, this entire day, where I was in a pretty foul state. I started to let my thinking go. Well-being started to come back. Wisdom started to come back. And then I was able to start to choose what thoughts I wanted to have in my mind that would drive the feeling. And within several days, I had moved completely out of that state of being, of dismay, disappointment, anger, frustration, judgment, to a much higher level rung, let's say, on the ladder of consciousness, where I was above and beyond what I had been at before that experience I had on the Sunday, right? So it lifted me up, even past where I was, above and beyond what I had been creating. And now I'm sitting here with you right now, creating this video because of it, right? And this was not going to happen before this occurrence. It just didn't even occur to me. I'm just looking over my notes here, making sure I covered all the things that I really want to cover. Yeah, so I think that's about it. Calling this emotional reorientation. It's been a really awesome experience, just sharing this. Came up with some ideas. I think I'm going to do an evaluation on this practice session